The wagon jolted over another rut in the dusty road, and Penelope Lawson gripped the splintered wood beneath her as she stared at her father's hunched shoulders, knowing that by sunset she would belong to a stranger in exchange for 3 sacks of winter wheat seed and 2 breeding heifers. She was 21 years old, and her life had just been reduced to the value of livestock. It was late spring in 1878, and the Nevada Territory stretched endlessly around them, all sagebrush and sun-bleached rock under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Hamilton had been a booming silver town once, but those days were dying along with the mines, and people were desperate. Her father, Edmund Lawson, had lost everything when his claim dried up, and now he sat rigid and silent as he drove their last remaining wagon toward the Triple T Ranch, where a cowboy named Marcus Thorne had agreed to the arrangement. Penelope had never met Marcus Thorne. She knew only what her father had told her in clipped, shame-filled sentences: that he was a ranch foreman, 26 years old, that he ran cattle for an outfit south of Hamilton, and that he needed supplies more than he needed a wife, but was willing to make the trade because he was tired of cooking his own meals and mending his own clothes. The words had cut through Penelope like a dull knife, slow and painful. Her mother had died 3 years ago of consumption, and Penelope had tried to hold their small household together while her father chased one failing mine after another. She had scrubbed floors for the boarding house, taken in washing, sold her mother's jewelry piece by piece. It had never been enough, and now her father, broken and defeated, had arranged this transaction as casually as if she were a piece of furniture. The ranch came into view just as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. It was a sprawling operation with a sturdy main house built of timber and stone, several outbuildings, corrals filled with horses and cattle, and miles of fencing that spoke of hard work and careful planning. Penelope felt her stomach twist. At least it was not some ramshackle homestead with a dirt floor and a leaking roof, but that knowledge brought no comfort. She was still being sold. Her father pulled the wagon to a stop near the main house, and a man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his dusty trousers. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of aged whiskey. His face was weathered from years in the sun, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew his own strength. This was Marcus Thorne. He approached the wagon slowly, his gaze moving from Edmund to Penelope and then back again. There was something in his expression that Penelope could not read, something that was not quite satisfaction or eagerness, but rather a kind of wary assessment, as if he were evaluating a situation he was not entirely comfortable with. "Lawson," Marcus said, his voice low and measured. He did not extend his hand in greeting. "Thorne," her father replied. "I brought her, as we agreed." The words made Penelope feel like a package being delivered. She climbed down from the wagon without waiting for assistance, her worn calico dress dusty from the journey, her brown hair pulled back in a simple braid. She stood as straight as she could and met Marcus Thorne's eyes directly, refusing to cower or appear defeated. If she was going to be bartered like livestock, she would at least maintain her dignity. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition of something he had not expected. He cleared his throat and turned back to her father. "The seed and livestock are in the barn," Marcus said. "I will help you load them." Her father nodded and moved toward the barn without a word to Penelope, without a goodbye or an apology or even a glance back. She watched him go, her hands clenched at her sides, and felt the last thread connecting her to her old life snap cleanly in two. "Miss Lawson," Marcus said quietly, and she turned to look at him. He was standing a few feet away, his hat in his hands now, his expression serious. "I am going to be honest with you. I agreed to this arrangement because your father said you were in a bad situation and needed somewhere to go. He made it sound like you were agreeable to the idea." Penelope let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Agreeable? I was told 3 days ago that I was being traded for seed and cattle. I was not asked if I was agreeable." Marcus's jaw tightened, and he looked toward the barn where her father was already inspecting the livestock. "I thought as much," he said. "Your father struck me as a desperate man, but I did not realize he was a dishonest one." "And yet you went through with it," Penelope said, her voice sharper than she intended. "I did," Marcus admitted, meeting her eyes again. "And I am not proud of that. But I want to make something clear to you right now before anything else happens. You are not my possession. You are not my servant. You are not an object I purchased." Penelope stared at him, confused and uncertain. "Then what am I?" "You are my equal," Marcus said simply. "And you are free to leave whenever you choose. I will not stop you." The words hung in the air between them, so unexpected that Penelope could not immediately process them. She had spent 3 days preparing herself for servitude, for being treated as property, for losing every shred of autonomy she had left. She had not prepared for this. "I do not understand," she said slowly. "You gave my father valuable supplies. You made an agreement." "I made an agreement with a man who lied to me," Marcus said. "That does not obligate you to anything. If you want to stay here, you are welcome. I have a spare room in the house, and you can work alongside me on the ranch if you choose. I will pay you fair wages for any work you do. Or if you want to leave, I will give you money for passage to wherever you want to go." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry in front of this stranger, no matter how kind his words sounded. "Why would you do that? You do not even know me." "Because it is the right thing to do," Marcus said. He settled his hat back on his head and gestured toward the house. "Come inside. You must be tired and hungry from the journey. We can talk more after you have had a chance to rest." Her father emerged from the barn, leading the 2 heifers while Marcus's ranch hands loaded the seed onto his wagon. Edmund still did not look at his daughter, did not say goodbye or offer any explanation or apology. He simply climbed onto the wagon, took up the reins, and drove away down the long, dusty road toward Hamilton, leaving Penelope standing in front of the ranch house with a man she had only just met. Marcus watched the wagon disappear into the distance, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Penelope and said, "Let me show you the house." The interior was surprisingly well kept for a bachelor's home. The main room had a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with 4 chairs, shelves lined with books, and windows that let in the golden afternoon light. There was a small kitchen area with a cast iron stove and neatly organized supplies, and 2 doors that led to separate bedrooms. "This one is yours," Marcus said, opening the door on the left. The room was simple but clean, with a bed covered in quilts, a dresser, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and a window that looked out over the corrals. "It is not much, but the roof does not leak and the bed is comfortable." Penelope stepped into the room, running her hand over the smooth wood of the dresser. It was more than she had expected, more than she felt she deserved after being bartered away like a commodity. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I will leave you to settle in," Marcus said. "There is water in the pitcher, and I will cook something for supper in about an hour. Come out whenever you are ready." He closed the door gently, leaving her alone. Penelope sat down on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had happened. Her father had sold her. The man who was supposed to protect her, who was supposed to love her, had traded her away to solve his own problems. And the stranger who had received her in that transaction had immediately offered her freedom. She did not know what to make of Marcus Thorne. His words had been kind, but words were cheap. Men said all sorts of things they did not mean, especially to women they wanted to manipulate. She would have to watch him carefully, see if his actions matched his promises. For now, though, she had a roof over her head and a bed to sleep in, which was more security than she had possessed 3 days ago. Penelope washed her face and hands, braided her hair more neatly, and changed into her only other dress, which was hardly less worn than the first. Then she took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked out into the main room. Marcus was at the stove, stirring something in a large pot that smelled of beef and vegetables. He glanced up when she entered and gestured to the table. "Sit down. This is almost ready." She sat, watching as he moved efficiently around the kitchen, slicing bread and setting out plates and cups. He poured water from a pitcher and then ladled stew into the bowls, setting one in front of her before taking his own seat across the table. "It is not fancy," he said, "but it is filling." Penelope picked up her spoon and tasted the stew. It was good, better than she had expected, with tender chunks of beef and vegetables seasoned with herbs. She realized she was starving and ate several spoonfuls before looking up to find Marcus watching her. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" he asked. "Yesterday morning," she admitted. "My father did not think to pack anything for the journey." Marcus's expression darkened, but he said nothing. Instead, he pushed the bread basket closer to her and said, "Eat as much as you want. There is plenty." They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the clink of spoons against bowls and the soft crackle of the fire in the stove. Penelope kept stealing glances at Marcus, trying to understand him. He did not look cruel or mean, but he did not look particularly soft either. He was a working man, strong and capable, with calloused hands and the kind of quiet competence that came from years of hard labor. She wondered what had made him agree to her father's proposal in the first place, and what had made him so quick to release her from any obligation. Finally, Marcus set down his spoon and looked at her directly. "I imagine you have questions," he said. "You are welcome to ask them." Penelope set down her own spoon and folded her hands in her lap. "Why did you agree to my father's arrangement if you did not actually want a wife?" "I did not say I did not want a wife," Marcus said carefully. "I said I agreed to help someone who needed help. Your father told me you were orphaned with no prospects, and that you were willing to come here and keep house in exchange for room and board." He made it sound like a mutually beneficial arrangement, not a transaction where you had no say. "And when you learned the truth, I decided I would not hold you to an agreement you never made," Marcus said. "That would make me no better than him." Penelope studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. "What do you expect from me, then? You said I could work for wages, but doing what?" "Whatever you want," Marcus said. "If you know how to cook and keep house, I would pay you to do that. If you would rather work with the horses or cattle, I could teach you that too. Or if you want to do something else entirely, we can figure it out. The point is, you would be choosing to do the work and being compensated fairly for it, not forced into servitude because your father made a bad bargain." It was almost too good to be true, and Penelope's instinct was to be suspicious. But there was something in Marcus's steady gaze, in the quiet sincerity of his voice, that made her want to believe him. "And if I choose to leave, then I will give you enough money to get to Carson City or Sacramento, whichever you prefer, and you can start over somewhere else," Marcus said. "Though I hope you will at least stay a few days and think it over before you decide. You have had a shock, and you should not make big decisions when you are overwhelmed." Penelope felt something in her chest loosen slightly. He was right. She was overwhelmed, exhausted, and still reeling from her father's betrayal. She needed time to think, to figure out what she wanted to do next. "I will stay for a few days," she said, "and I will help with the cooking and housework while I am here, not because I owe you but because I do not like being idle." Marcus nodded, something that might have been approval flickering in his eyes. "That is fair, thank you." They finished their meal, and Penelope insisted on washing the dishes while Marcus went out to check on the livestock one more time before dark. She stood at the basin, scrubbing plates and bowls, and tried to organize her chaotic thoughts. Everything had changed so quickly. This morning she had been her father's daughter, however unwanted. Now she was a woman alone in the world, dependent on the kindness of a stranger who seemed determined to treat her with more respect than her own father had. When Marcus came back inside, he found her wiping down the table. "You do not have to do that tonight," he said. "You have had a long day." "So have you," Penelope pointed out. "And I told you I do not like being idle." He smiled then, just a slight curve of his mouth, but it transformed his whole face, making him look younger and less severe. "I can see you are going to keep me on my toes." "I suppose you will have to get used to that," Penelope said, and was surprised to find herself almost smiling back. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar room, Penelope stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of everything. She had expected cruelty, or at best indifference. She had not expected kindness, and certainly not respect. Marcus Thorne was a puzzle she could not yet solve, and she was not sure if that made him dangerous or simply unusual. But as she drifted toward sleep, she realized that for the first time in years, she felt something that might have been hope. It was fragile and uncertain, but it was there. And that, at least, was a start. The next morning, Penelope woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the pale light of dawn filtering through the window. She dressed quickly, braided her hair, and walked out into the main room to find Marcus already up, stoking the fire in the stove. "Good morning," he said, glancing up. "I was going to let you sleep, but since you are awake, would you like coffee?" "Please," Penelope said, realizing she was desperate for the bitter comfort of hot coffee. She had not had any in weeks, since it was an expense her father could not afford. Marcus poured 2 cups and handed her one. They sat at the table together, the early morning quiet settling around them. Outside, Penelope could hear the sounds of the ranch coming to life. Cattle lowing, horses whinnying, the voices of ranch hands starting their day. "I usually start work about an hour after sunrise," Marcus said. "Today, I need to ride out and check the northern fence line. Some of the posts were damaged in a storm last week. You are welcome to come with me if you want to see more of the ranch, or you can stay here and do whatever you like." Penelope considered. She was curious about the ranch and about Marcus's work, but she was also aware that she did not yet entirely trust him. Still, staying in the house alone felt like hiding, and she had never been the kind of woman who hid from things. "I will come with you," she said, "if you do not mind." "I do not mind at all," Marcus said. He looked pleased, actually, which surprised her. "Do you know how to ride?" "I used to," Penelope said, "though it has been a few years." "That is all right. I have a gentle mare that will be perfect for you." After a quick breakfast of bread and eggs, Marcus led her out to the barn and introduced her to a pretty chestnut mare with a white blaze. "This is Rosie," he said, running a hand down the horse's neck. "She is patient and steady. She will take good care of you." Penelope approached slowly, holding out her hand for the mare to sniff. Rosie nuzzled her palm, and Penelope felt a rush of affection for the animal. It had been so long since she had been around horses, so long since she had done anything except work and worry. Marcus saddled both horses efficiently, showing Penelope how to check the girth and adjust the stirrups. Then he helped her mount, his hands steady and impersonal, before swinging up onto his own horse, a tall bay gelding. They rode out across the ranch land, and Penelope felt something inside her expand as they moved through the open country. The morning air was cool and fresh, scented with sagebrush and wildflowers. The sky was a brilliant blue, unmarred by clouds, and the mountains in the distance were still capped with snow. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way, and Penelope found herself breathing more deeply, as if she could take in the landscape and make it part of herself. Marcus was a good guide, pointing out landmarks and explaining the workings of the ranch. He ran about 200 head of cattle, he told her, along with a string of horses that he bred and trained for sale. He employed 4 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse, and during busy seasons like branding and roundup, he hired additional help from town. It was hard work and the profit margins were tight, but he loved it in a way he had never loved anything else. Why ranching? Penelope asked as they rode along the fence line, checking for damage. What made you choose this life? Marcus was quiet for a moment, his eyes scanning the horizon. My father was a rancher, he said finally. Back in Texas, I grew up on his land learning everything he could teach me. But he died when I was 19, and my older brother inherited the ranch. He and I did not see eye to eye on how things should be run, so I left. Worked as a ranch hand for a few years, saved every penny I could, and then bought this land 5 years ago. It is not as big as my father's ranch was, but it is mine. Every fence post, every head of cattle, every decision, it is mine. There was pride in his voice, but also something deeper. A need to prove himself, perhaps, or to build something that could not be taken away. Penelope understood that feeling all too well. They worked together for several hours, with Marcus showing her how to identify weak spots in the fence and make temporary repairs, until he could come back with proper supplies. Penelope found herself enjoying the physical labor, the sense of accomplishment that came from fixing something broken. It was so different from the endless, invisible work she had done in her father's house, where nothing she did ever seemed to be enough. By midday, they stopped to rest in the shade of a rocky outcropping. Marcus pulled out a canteen and a cloth-wrapped package that turned out to contain sandwiches and apples. He handed half to Penelope, and they ate in companionable silence, watching the cattle graze in the distance. You are good at this, Marcus said after a while. The work, I mean. You do not complain or slow down, and you pay attention to what you are doing. Penelope shrugged. I am used to hard work. My father was not much for providing, so I learned early how to do things myself. That must have been difficult, Marcus said carefully. Growing up like that. It was what it was, Penelope said, trying to keep her voice neutral. She did not want pity, especially not from him. My mother tried to make things better, but she was sick for a long time before she died. After that, it was just me and my father, and he was more interested in chasing silver strikes than taking care of his daughter. Marcus looked at her with those steady, whiskey-colored eyes. He should have done better by you. The simple statement, delivered without drama or embellishment, hit Penelope harder than any elaborate sympathy could have. She turned away, blinking hard against the sudden sting of tears. Yes, she said quietly. He should have. They rode back to the ranch in the late afternoon, both of them tired but satisfied with the work they had accomplished. Penelope unsaddled Rosie with Marcus's help and brushed the mare down carefully, taking pleasure in the simple, meditative task. By the time she was done, her arms ached and her legs were sore from riding, but she felt more alive than she had in months. That evening, she cooked supper while Marcus tended to the animals. She found the kitchen surprisingly well stocked, with flour and cornmeal, dried beans and salt pork, canned vegetables, and even a precious jar of honey. She made a simple meal of fried salt pork, beans, and cornbread, and was rewarded by the look of genuine appreciation on Marcus's face when he tasted it. "This is delicious," he said. "Much better than anything I have made in months." "It is just plain food," Penelope said, but she felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment. "Plain food cooked well is better than fancy food cooked poorly," Marcus said. "My mother used to say that." It was the first time he had mentioned his mother, and Penelope found herself curious. "Is she still alive?" "No," Marcus said. "She died when I was 16. Fever took her quick. 1 week she was fine, the next she was gone." "I am sorry," Penelope said, and meant it. "So am I," Marcus said. "She was a good woman, strong and practical, but kind too. She would have liked you, I think." The statement caught Penelope off guard, and she did not know how to respond. They barely knew each other. How could Marcus possibly know what his mother would have thought of her? But there was no guile in his expression, no hidden meaning. He was simply stating what he believed to be true. Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Penelope took over the cooking and housework, but she also rode out with Marcus when he would let her, learning more about the ranch and how it operated. The ranch hands, a weathered crew of men ranging from their 20s to their 50s, treated her with respectful courtesy, tipping their hats and calling her Miss Lawson. Marcus had clearly told them she was not to be bothered, and they honored that, keeping their distance but offering friendly greetings when they crossed paths. Penelope found herself watching Marcus when she thought he was not looking. He was a good boss, fair and hardworking, never asking his men to do anything he would not do himself. He was also patient, taking the time to explain things to her when she asked questions, never making her feel stupid or incompetent. And he was true to his word about treating her as an equal. He did not order her around or expect her to wait on him. Instead, they worked together, each contributing what they could to keep the household running smoothly. It was so different from what she had expected that sometimes Penelope had to remind herself this was real, that Marcus was not going to suddenly change and reveal himself to be cruel or controlling. But days turned into a week, and then 2 weeks, and he remained exactly who he had been from the beginning. Steady, honest, and respectful. Slowly, carefully, Penelope began to relax. She began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she could be safe. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Penelope was sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Marcus came out and sat down beside her. They had fallen into the habit of spending this quiet time together at the end of the day, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. "I have been thinking," Marcus said after a few minutes. "You have been here almost a month now, and you have not said anything about leaving. Does that mean you have decided to stay?" Penelope considered the question. The truth was, she had not seriously thought about leaving in over a week. She liked the ranch, liked the work, and most surprising of all, she liked Marcus. He was easy to be around, undemanding and straightforward. She felt more at peace here than she had felt anywhere in years. "I think I would like to stay," she said slowly, "if the offer is still open." "It is," Marcus said, "and I am glad. You have made this place feel more like a home than it has in a long time." Penelope looked at him, at the strong lines of his profile outlined against the fading light. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why have you been so kind to me? You did not know me, and you had no reason to treat me the way you have. Most men would have taken advantage of the situation." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "My mother was bartered once," he said finally, his voice low. "Before she married my father, her own father tried to trade her to settle a debt. She ran away before it could happen, and my father found her on the road and helped her. He gave her a choice, the same choice I gave you, and she chose to stay with him, and they fell in love and built a life together." He turned to look at Penelope, and there was something vulnerable in his eyes, something raw and honest. I grew up seeing what it looked like when two people treated each other as equals, when they built something together instead of one person owning the other. And I swore that, if I ever had the chance, I would do the same. I would never treat another person, especially a woman, as property. So when your father came to me with his proposition, I agreed because I thought I was helping someone who needed help. And when I realized the truth, I knew I had to make it right, because that is what my father would have done and what my mother would have expected of me. Penelope felt tears spill down her cheeks, and this time she did not try to stop them. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me a choice." Marcus reached over and gently wiped the tears from her face with his thumb, the gesture so tender that it made her heart ache. "You deserve to have choices, Penelope. You deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Do not ever forget that." Something shifted between them in that moment, something profound and irrevocable. Penelope looked into Marcus's eyes and saw not just kindness, but genuine caring. And she realized, with a mixture of fear and hope, that she was beginning to care for him too. Not out of gratitude or obligation, but because of who he was, the man who had given her back her dignity when everyone else had tried to take it away. As spring turned to summer, the ranch grew busier. There was branding to be done, fences to mend, hay to cut and store for the winter. Penelope worked alongside Marcus and the ranch hands, learning skills she had never imagined she would need. She learned to rope and brand calves, to doctor sick cattle, to mend tack and fix broken equipment. Her hands grew calloused and her skin tanned, and she felt herself growing stronger, both physically and emotionally. Marcus was a constant presence, always nearby, always ready to teach her something new or help when she struggled. But there was more to their interactions now, an undercurrent of something deeper than friendship or partnership. Penelope caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she could not quite name, and she found herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering what it would be like to touch his hand or feel his arms around her. It was confusing and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. She had never been courted, had never had a man look at her the way Marcus sometimes did, and she did not know if what she felt was real or just gratitude for his kindness. How could she tell the difference? One hot afternoon in July, Penelope was in the kitchen making bread when Marcus came in from the fields, dusty and tired. He poured himself a cup of water and drank it down, then refilled it and handed it to her. "You look like you could use a break," he said. "I am almost done with this batch," Penelope said, punching down the dough. "Then I need to get supper started." "Supper can wait an hour," Marcus said. "Come outside with me. I want to show you something." Curious, Penelope wiped her hands on her apron and followed him out of the house. He led her to the barn, where one of the mares stood in a stall with a newborn foal nursing at her side. "She foaled this morning while we were out," Marcus said, his voice soft with wonder. "I have been checking on her all day. This is her first, and she is doing beautifully." Penelope approached the stall slowly, not wanting to startle the mare. The foal was a tiny thing, all legs and big eyes, with a coat that would probably darken as it grew. It looked up at her curiously, then went back to nursing. "It is perfect," Penelope breathed. "She is a filly," Marcus said. "And if you want, I would like you to name her." Penelope turned to look at him in surprise. "Me? Why?" "Because you have become as much a part of this ranch as I am," Marcus said simply. "And because I want you to know that you belong here. This is your home now if you want it to be." The words settled over Penelope like a warm blanket, chasing away the last remnants of doubt and fear. "I want it to be," she said. "I want to stay here, Marcus, with you." Marcus smiled, that rare, transformative smile that made her heart skip. "I am glad." I cannot imagine this place without you anymore." They stood there together, watching the mare and her foal, and Penelope felt something she had not felt in years: contentment. Not just satisfaction or relief, but true, deep contentment. She was home. As summer deepened, so did the connection between Penelope and Marcus. They worked together during the day and sat together on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. Marcus told her stories about his childhood in Texas, about his father's ranch and the brother he had not spoken to in years. Penelope told him about her mother, about the woman who had tried so hard to make a home out of nothing, and who had taught her daughter to be strong even when the world tried to break her. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, the small details that made up a life. Marcus liked his coffee strong and black. Penelope hummed while she cooked. Marcus was an early riser, up before dawn every day. Penelope loved to read and would spend hours with one of the books from Marcus's shelves when the work was done. They fit together in a way that felt natural and right, as if they had been doing this for years instead of months. But there was also a growing tension, an awareness of each other that was becoming harder to ignore. Penelope would catch herself staring at Marcus's hands as he worked, at the play of muscles in his arms and shoulders. She would lie awake at night thinking about what it would feel like to kiss him, to be held by him. And she could see the same awareness in Marcus's eyes when he looked at her, a hunger he was clearly trying to keep in check. Neither of them spoke about it, though. They were both too cautious, too aware of the delicate balance they had built. Penelope did not want Marcus to think she felt obligated to him, and Marcus did not want Penelope to feel pressured. So they circled around each other, wanting but not quite daring to reach for what they wanted. The turning point came in late August, on a day that started like any other. Penelope was working in the garden she had planted behind the house, pulling weeds and checking the progress of the tomatoes and squash. The afternoon was hot, the sun beating down mercilessly, and she was so focused on her work that she did not hear the rider approaching until he was nearly at the fence. She looked up to see her father sitting on a sway-backed horse, looking even more haggard and desperate than he had the last time she saw him. Her stomach clenched with a mixture of anger and old, unwanted pain. "Penelope," Edmund Lawson said, dismounting awkwardly, "I need to talk to you." "I have nothing to say to you," Penelope said, standing up and brushing the dirt from her hands. "You sold me like I was livestock. You do not get to come here and act like we have anything to discuss." "I know I did wrong," her father said, and he did look genuinely ashamed. "I know I hurt you. But I am desperate, girl. I have nothing left. The mine is played out, I have no money, and I am about to be evicted from my room. I thought maybe you could help me. Maybe Thorne would give me some work or a loan or something." The audacity of it took Penelope's breath away. "You want me to ask Marcus for money? After what you did?" "You are my daughter," Edmund said, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. "You owe me something. I raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head." "You did the bare minimum a parent is supposed to do," Penelope said, her voice shaking with anger. "And then you traded me away the moment I became inconvenient. I owe you nothing." Marcus emerged from the barn at that moment, clearly having heard the raised voices. He crossed the yard quickly, his expression hard as stone when he saw Edmund. "You need to leave," Marcus said flatly. "Now." "I just want to talk to my daughter," Edmund protested. "Your daughter has made it clear she does not want to talk to you," Marcus said, "and I want you off my land." "This is between me and her," Edmund said, his voice rising. "You have no right to interfere." "I have every right," Marcus said, stepping between Edmund and Penelope. "This is my land, and Penelope is under my protection. You sold her to me, remember." "Well, I am telling you now that she is worth 1,000 times more than the pitiful supplies I gave you, and I will not let you hurt her again. So you can leave on your own, or I can have my men escort you off the property. Your choice." Edmund looked at Marcus, then at Penelope, and something ugly twisted his face. "You think you are better than me now," he spat at his daughter. "Living here playing house with this cowboy, you are still just the worthless daughter of a failed prospector." "No," Penelope said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I am not worthless. I am strong and capable and worthy of respect, and I do not need you to tell me otherwise." Marcus's hand moved to the gun at his hip, not drawing it but making his intention clear. "Leave. Now. And do not come back." Edmund looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Marcus's eyes must have convinced him it would be a bad idea. He mounted his horse clumsily and rode off, muttering curses under his breath. As soon as he was out of sight, Penelope's legs gave out and she sank to her knees in the dirt, sobbing. Marcus was beside her in an instant, pulling her into his arms and holding her while she cried out all the hurt and anger and betrayal she had been carrying for months. "I am sorry," Marcus murmured against her hair. "I am so sorry you had to go through that." "He has not changed," Penelope choked out. "He still only sees me as something he can use." "Then he is a fool," Marcus said fiercely, "because you are extraordinary, Penelope. You are brave and strong and kind, and anyone who cannot see that does not deserve you in their life." Penelope pulled back to look at him, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. It was not just sympathy or friendship. It was love, pure and undisguised. "Marcus," she whispered. "I love you," he said, the words tumbling out as if he could not hold them back any longer. "I have loved you for months, but I did not want to say anything because I did not want you to feel obligated. I wanted you to choose me freely, not because you thought you owed me. But I cannot keep it inside anymore. I love you, Penelope. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you hum when you cook. I love the way you face every challenge without backing down. I love who you are and who you have become. And if you do not feel the same way, I understand. I will still be your friend and your partner, and I will never bring it up again, but I needed you to know." Penelope's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. "You love me, with everything I have," Marcus said simply. "I love you too," Penelope said, the words coming easily now that she was allowing herself to feel them. "I have been trying not to, trying to convince myself it was just gratitude, but it is not. It is real. I love you, Marcus Thorne." Marcus's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen, and then he was kissing her, his hands cupping her face as if she were something precious and fragile. Penelope kissed him back with all the pent-up longing and hope she had been carrying, wrapping her arms around his neck and losing herself in the moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Not because of any bargain or obligation, but because we love each other. Be my wife, my partner, my equal in all things." "Yes," Penelope said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married a week later in Hamilton, in a simple ceremony at the small church with the ranch hands as witnesses. Penelope wore a new dress that Marcus had bought her in town, a soft blue calico with lace at the collar and cuffs. Marcus wore his best suit and could not stop smiling the entire day. The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and when Marcus kissed her, Penelope felt like her heart might actually take flight. They had a small celebration back at the ranch, with food and music and laughter. The ranch hands toasted them with whiskey, and one of them pulled out a fiddle and played while the others danced. Penelope danced with Marcus under the stars, his arms strong around her, and thought that she had never been so happy in her entire life. That night, Marcus carried her over the threshold of the house, both of them laughing like children. He set her down gently in their bedroom, the one that had been his alone and was now theirs together, and looked at her with such love and desire that Penelope felt her breath catch. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "A little," Penelope admitted, "but I trust you." "I will be gentle," Marcus promised, "and if you want to stop at any point, just tell me and we will." He was true to his word, taking his time, making sure she was comfortable and ready at every step. And when they finally came together as husband and wife, it was tender and loving and perfect, a joining of not just bodies but hearts and souls. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, and Marcus traced idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "You are my equal, not my possession," he murmured. "Do you believe that now?" "I do," Penelope said, turning to kiss him softly. "I believe it completely." The years that followed were filled with hard work and deep joy. Penelope and Marcus built a life together on the ranch, true partners in every sense of the word. They made decisions together, worked side by side, supported each other through difficulties, and celebrated successes as a team. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing from 200 head of cattle to nearly 400, and their reputation for quality horses spread throughout Nevada and beyond. 2 years after their wedding, Penelope gave birth to their first child, a sturdy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's determination. They named him Thomas, after Marcus's father, and he brought a new dimension of love and chaos into their lives. Marcus was a devoted father, changing diapers and walking the floor with a colicky baby without complaint, treating his son with the same respect and partnership he showed his wife. 18 months after Thomas came a daughter, Sarah, who had her mother's brown hair and her father's whiskey-colored eyes. She was followed 2 years later by another son, Daniel, and then finally by a second daughter, Emma. The house that had once been too quiet rang with children's laughter and the organized chaos of a large, loving family. Penelope often thought back to that day when her father had brought her to the ranch, terrified and angry and certain her life was over. She thought about how wrong she had been, how that terrible moment had actually been the beginning of something beautiful. Marcus had given her back her dignity when no one else would, had treated her as an equal when the world wanted to treat her as property, and had loved her with a devotion that never wavered. The ranch hands who had been there since the beginning loved to tell the story to new hires, about how Marcus had agreed to a bride trade, and then immediately set the woman free, and how she had chosen to stay not out of obligation but out of love. It became part of the ranch's legend, a story that spoke to the character of the people who ran it. Penelope never saw her father again after that terrible day when he came begging for money. She heard through gossip in town that he had eventually left Nevada, drifting east in search of another elusive fortune. She felt a pang of sadness when she heard the news, but it was distant and muted, the grief of losing someone who had never really been present in her life anyway. Her real family was here in this house, with this man and these children. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Marcus surprised Penelope with a gift, a beautiful mare, the daughter of Rosie, the horse she had ridden on her first day at the ranch. The filly had grown into a magnificent animal, and Marcus had been training her specifically for Penelope. "Her name is Hope," Marcus said, leading the mare out of the barn, "because that is what you gave me when you came into my life. Hope for a real partnership, a real marriage, a real home." Penelope threw her arms around her husband, tears streaming down her face. "You gave me hope too," she said. "You gave me everything." They rode out together that evening, just the two of them, leaving the children in the care of the ranch hands for a few hours. They rode to the northern fence line where they had worked together on that first day, and sat on the same rocky outcropping where they had shared sandwiches and begun to truly know each other. "You ever regret it?" Penelope asked, leaning against Marcus's shoulder. "Agreeing to that bargain with my father. It must have seemed like such a strange, uncomfortable situation." "I regret that you were put in that position," Marcus said. "I regret that your father treated you that way, but I do not regret for 1 second that you came into my life. Even if you had chosen to leave, even if we had never fallen in love, I would still be grateful that I got to know you. You made me a better man, Penelope." "You made me a better woman," Penelope said. "You taught me that I was worthy of respect and dignity. You gave me a life I never could have imagined." "We gave each other a life," Marcus corrected gently. "That is what partnership means. We built this together." They sat there as the sun set, painting the Nevada sky in shades of gold and crimson and purple, and Penelope thought about all the ways her life could have gone differently. If her father had not made that terrible bargain, if Marcus had been a different kind of man, if she had chosen to leave instead of stay. So many small choices that had led to this moment, to this life, to this love. But she was grateful for all of it, even the hard parts, because they had brought her here. To a home she had helped build, to children she adored, to a man who loved her as an equal and a partner and a cherished companion. She had been bartered for seed and livestock, traded away like a commodity, and Marcus Thorne had given her back her dignity and her worth. And in doing so, he had given her everything. The ranch continued to thrive as the years passed. Thomas grew into a serious young man who took after his father in his love of the land and his skill with horses. Sarah was wild and adventurous, always getting into mischief and making her parents laugh with her antics. Daniel was quiet and thoughtful, preferring books to roping, and they encouraged his scholarly interests, even sending him to school in Carson City when he was old enough. Emma, the youngest, was a perfect blend of all of them, equally comfortable in the saddle or in the kitchen, fierce and loving in equal measure. Marcus taught all the children, both sons and daughters, how to run the ranch, believing that knowledge was never wasted and that his daughters deserved the same skills and opportunities as his sons. It was an unusual approach for the time, but the Thorne family had always done things their own way. Penelope watched her children grow with a mixture of pride and bittersweetness, knowing that each milestone was a step toward the day they would leave to build their own lives. But she also knew that they would carry with them the lessons she and Marcus had taught them about partnership, respect, equality, and love. They would know how to treat others with dignity because they had been raised with dignity. They would know how to build strong, equal partnerships because that was what they had seen modeled every day. When Penelope turned 40, Marcus threw her a party at the ranch, inviting neighbors from miles around. The house was filled with people, food, music, and laughter. Their children and grandchildren, for Thomas had married by then and given them 2 beautiful grandchildren, filled the rooms with noise and energy. Marcus pulled Penelope aside during the celebration, leading her out to the porch where they had spent so many evenings talking and dreaming together. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a delicate gold locket, engraved with their initials and the date of their wedding. Penelope opened it to find 2 tiny photographs, one of Marcus and one of herself, taken on their wedding day. "So you can carry me with you always," Marcus said softly. "The way I carry you in my heart every moment of every day." Penelope could not speak past the lump in her throat, so she simply pulled him close and held him. This man who had changed her life in every possible way, this man who had seen her worth when no one else did, This man who had loved her as an equal from the very first day. They stood there together on the porch, the sounds of the party drifting out from inside, and Penelope thought about the girl she had been. Frightened, angry, convinced her life was over. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be all right, that the terrible thing happening to her would actually be the beginning of the most beautiful chapter of her life. But that girl had not needed reassurance. She had needed exactly what she got. A cowboy who understood that a woman was not a possession to be owned, but a person to be respected. A man who believed in partnership over ownership, in equality over domination. A man who proved every single day, through words and actions, that she was his equal in all things. Marcus Thorne had given her dignity when she had been bartered like livestock, and in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift anyone could give, the freedom to choose. And she had chosen him, not out of obligation or fear or gratitude, but out of love. Pure, simple, enduring love. As the stars came out over the Nevada desert and the party continued inside, Penelope and Marcus stood together on the porch of the ranch they had built together, holding hands and watching the moonrise. Their children were safe and happy. Their grandchildren were healthy and growing. Their life together was everything they had hoped it would be. "I love you," Penelope whispered. "I love you too," Marcus said, squeezing her hand. "My equal, my partner, my love." And that, Penelope thought with a full heart, was exactly who she was. Not a possession, not a commodity, not something to be bartered or traded. She was Marcus Thorne's equal, his partner, his love, and he was hers. The years continued to unfold with a gentle rhythm, marked by seasons and harvests and the milestones of their children's lives. The ranch became known throughout Nevada not just for its quality livestock, but for the integrity of the people who ran it. Marcus and Penelope Thorne were respected in Hamilton and beyond, known as fair employers, generous neighbors, and devoted parents. When Penelope was 45, she received unexpected news. Her father had died in Colorado, where he had been living in a boarding house, still chasing dreams of striking it rich. The lawyer who contacted her said that Edmund had left a letter to be delivered to his daughter upon his death. Penelope held the letter for a long time before opening it, unsure if she wanted to read whatever final words her father had left her. But curiosity and perhaps a lingering thread of that old daughterly attachment won out, and she finally broke the seal. The letter was short and written in a shaky hand. In it, Edmund Lawson admitted that he had been a terrible father, that his obsession with finding silver had cost him everything that truly mattered. He wrote that he had followed news of Penelope over the years, hearing reports of the successful ranch she and her husband ran, of her children and her reputation. He said he was proud of her, though he knew he had no right to be, and that his greatest regret was trading her away like she was worth nothing when she was worth everything. He asked for no forgiveness, said he did not deserve it, but wanted her to know that in his final days, the only thing he wished he could change was how he had treated his daughter. He ended the letter by saying he hoped she was happy, and that she had built a life far better than anything he could have given her. Penelope read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face, while Marcus sat beside her in silent support. When she finally set it down, she did not know what to feel. Anger that it had taken his entire life and his approaching death for her father to see what he had lost. Sadness that they had never been able to reconcile. Relief that he had at least acknowledged what he had done. Gratitude that his terrible decision had led her to Marcus and this life. "It does not undo what he did," Marcus said quietly, taking her hand. "No," Penelope agreed, "but it is something. Not forgiveness, maybe, but closure." She kept the letter in a box with other important documents, a reminder of where she had come from and how far she had traveled. And she made sure to tell her own children often how much they were loved, how valued they were, how they were never just possessions or extensions of their parents but individuals worthy of respect and dignity. The cycle of harm ended with her. She would make sure of that. Thomas took over more and more of the ranch operations as Marcus grew older, showing the same integrity and work ethic his father had modeled. He had married a woman named Catherine, a school teacher from Hamilton, and together they were raising 3 children on a homestead adjacent to the main ranch. Sarah had shocked everyone by moving to San Francisco and opening a dress shop, which became wildly successful. Daniel had indeed pursued his scholarly interests, becoming a teacher and eventually a professor at a small college in California. And Emma had married a neighboring rancher's son and was running their combined properties with the same partnership approach she had learned from her parents. All the Thorne children spoke of their parents with deep respect and affection, telling anyone who would listen about how their mother and father had built something special together, how they had proven that a marriage of equals was not just possible but beautiful. The story of how Penelope had been bartered for livestock and Marcus had given her freedom and dignity became a family legend, passed down to grandchildren and great-grandchildren as an example of what love and respect truly meant. As Marcus and Penelope grew older, they slowed down but never stopped. They still rode out to check the fences together, though not as far or as often. They still worked side by side, though they delegated more to Thomas and the ranch hands. They still sat on the porch every evening, holding hands and watching the sunset, talking about their day and their dreams and their memories. On their 30th anniversary, Marcus was 56 and Penelope was 51, and they celebrated quietly with just their immediate family. The house was full of children and grandchildren, noise and laughter and love. After everyone had gone to bed, Penelope and Marcus sat on the porch as always, wrapped in blankets against the cool spring night. 30 years, Penelope said wonderingly. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I would do it all again, Marcus said. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you every single time. Even though I came to you as part of a livestock bargain, Penelope asked with a slight smile. Especially because of that, Marcus said seriously. Because it gave me the chance to show you and myself what kind of man I wanted to be. It gave me the chance to choose honor over convenience, respect over ownership, love over possession. And it gave me you. Penelope leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. You gave me everything, she said softly. A home, a family, a purpose. But most of all, you gave me back myself. You gave me the freedom to choose and the knowledge that I was worthy of choosing. You were always worthy, Marcus said, kissing the top of her head. I just made sure you knew it. They sat there in comfortable silence. 2 people who had built a life together from unpromising beginnings, who had turned a cruel bargain into a love story that would be remembered for generations. The ranch stretched out around them in the darkness. Every fence post and barn bore a testament to their partnership, every head of cattle and trained horse a product of their joint labor. As the years continued to pass, Marcus and Penelope watched their grandchildren grow and begin to have children of their own. They saw the ranch continue to prosper under Thomas's management, saw their other children build successful lives in their chosen paths, saw the values they had worked so hard to instill take root in the next generation. When Penelope was 62, Marcus fell ill during a particularly harsh winter. It started as a bad cough that would not go away and eventually turned into pneumonia. Penelope nursed him with fierce determination, refusing to let him go without a fight. She sat by his bedside day and night, reading to him, talking to him, holding his hand and willing her own strength into his body. Marcus recovered, though slowly, and emerged from the illness more frail than before. But his mind was still sharp, and his love for Penelope still burned as brightly as ever. He told her often that her devoted care had saved his life, but Penelope just squeezed his hand and said that was what partners did for each other. They had several more good years after that, years filled with great-grandchildren and quiet contentment, and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. They celebrated their 40th anniversary surrounded by so many family members that they had to hold the party outside, with tables set up all across the yard and children running everywhere. Marcus stood up at the celebration and gave a toast, his voice still strong despite his age. 40 years ago, he said, a man brought his daughter to my ranch and tried to trade her for seed and livestock. It was one of the worst things that could have happened to her, and one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because that daughter became my wife, my partner, my equal in all things. She turned a ranch into a home, a house into a family, and a transaction into a love story. He looked at Penelope, his eyes still the same warm whiskey color they had been when they first met, though now surrounded by wrinkles earned through decades of laughter and hard work. You were bartered like livestock, but you are priceless. You were treated like a possession, but you are a person of immense dignity and worth. You were given to me in a shameful bargain, but you chose to stay out of love, and that choice, that love, has been the greatest blessing of my life. Here is to 40 more years, my love, my equal, my everything. Everyone cheered and raised their glasses, and Penelope stood up and kissed her husband while their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren applauded. She had tears in her eyes, but they were happy tears, the kind that came from a heart so full it could not contain all the love it held. Marcus lived to the age of 73, passing peacefully in his sleep with Penelope beside him. He had lived a good, full life, and he left behind a legacy of integrity, hard work, and love. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched. Ranch hands he had employed and treated fairly, neighbors he had helped during hard times, family members he had loved unconditionally. Penelope stood by his grave in the small cemetery outside Hamilton, surrounded by their children, and knew that a part of her had died with him. But she also knew that everything they had built together would continue. The ranch would go on. Their children would carry forward the values they had taught. Their love story would be remembered and retold, a testament to what was possible when two people chose to treat each other with dignity and respect. She lived another 12 years after Marcus's death, staying active and involved with the ranch and her family until the very end. She never remarried. How could she, when she had already experienced the great love of her life? Instead, she poured her energy into her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, teaching them to ride and rope, telling them stories about their grandfather, making sure they understood the importance of treating others as equals. When Penelope died at the age of 85, she was laid to rest beside Marcus under the big Nevada sky they had both loved. The headstone read, Penelope Lawson Thorne, beloved wife, mother, and partner. She was bartered for livestock. He gave her dignity. Together they built a legacy of love. The ranch continued for generations after, each new generation of Thornes learning the story of Marcus and Penelope, of how their great-great-grandparents had turned a cruel transaction into a beautiful partnership. The values they had established, the idea that a marriage should be between equals, that dignity and respect were non-negotiable, that love was a choice renewed every day. These became the foundation upon which the entire family was built. And somewhere, in whatever realm exists beyond this life, Marcus and Penelope were together again, partners for eternity, equals in love and in death as they had been in life. The cowboy who had given a bartered woman her dignity back, and the woman who had chosen to stay and build a life with him, forever entwined in a love story that proved that even the worst circumstances could lead to the most beautiful outcomes when people chose kindness, respect, and equality over possession and control. Their story became a legend in Hamilton and the surrounding territory, passed down through generations. People would point to the Thorne Ranch and say, "That is where real love built something lasting. That is where a man proved that treating a woman as an equal makes a stronger partnership than any amount of dominance or control ever could. That is where dignity triumphed over cruelty." And it was true. From the ashes of a shameful bargain had risen a love story for the ages, a partnership that showed what was possible when two people truly saw each other as equals. Marcus Thorne had given Penelope Lawson her dignity back when everyone else, including her own father, had tried to take it away. And Penelope had given Marcus the love and partnership that made his life complete. They had built something beautiful together, something that lasted long after they were gone. A ranch that prospered, a family that thrived, a legacy of love and respect and equality that inspired generations. All because a cowboy had looked at a woman being bartered like livestock and said the words that changed both their lives forever. "You are my equal, not my possession." And in saying those words, in living those words every day for 47 years of marriage, Marcus Thorne had given Penelope Lawson the greatest gift one person can give another: the freedom to choose and the knowledge that she was worthy of that choice. It was a gift Penelope never forgot, and one she spent the rest of her life paying forward to everyone she met. Their love story ended the way all great love stories do. Not with a dramatic climax or a tragic separation, but with a lifetime of small moments that added up to something extraordinary. Two people choosing each other every day. Two people building something beautiful together through hard work and mutual respect. Two people proving that real love, the kind that lasts, is built on a foundation of equality and dignity. The Wild West was a harsh place. A place where survival often meant compromising one's values, where desperation could turn good people cruel and hard times could strip away dignity and hope. But in the midst of that harshness, Marcus and Penelope Thorne had created an oasis of love and respect. They had shown that even in the hardest circumstances, it was possible to choose kindness. Even when the world tried to reduce people to commodities, it was possible to insist on their dignity. Even when desperation led to terrible bargains, it was possible to choose a better way. And that, in the end, was the true legacy of Marcus and Penelope Thorne. Not just the successful ranch they built or the large family they raised, but the example they set. The proof that love built on equality and respect would always triumph over possession and control. The demonstration that the most powerful thing one person can say to another is not, "You are mine," but "You are my equal." It was a lesson learned by every generation of Thornes who came after them, and it was a lesson that spread beyond the family to the entire community. The story of the cowboy who gave a bartered woman her dignity became a touchstone, a reminder of what people were capable of at their best. And Marcus and Penelope, resting side by side under the Nevada sky they had loved, became not just ancestors but legends, their love story a beacon showing the way toward a better, more equal world.